Everyone complained about the BCS system and how it was unfair and how the computer was stupid. It turns out not really anything has changed, and if anything, the college football postseason has gotten substantially worse. If you're an Alabama, Clemson, or an Ohio State fan, you probably enjoy the playoff, but outside of that, most people complain about it. Most of the games are very boring to watch, and without a doubt, college football has the worst postseason of any major sport. The playoff is usually boring, the games are all blowouts, and it's the same teams every year, but at least you have the bowl games, right? Well, now the new trend is to opt out, and while I don't blame the players, as an injury could cost them millions of dollars, it has made bowl games extremely boring when you're seeing backups go against backups. There is a serious problem with college football. The postseason is a mess, and I don't even know how to fix it, but one thing is for certain, and that is that Alabama football is in charge of college football. Nick Saban is the best coach in college football history. The Tide are continuing to roll, and even in a year where they were not expected to be as good as before, they still always come out on top. Congratulations to the Tide, and in today's video, we're going to talk about just how dominant Alabama has been in the playoff, the season so far, what I expect from the Tide moving forward, and how we can fix the college football playoff, if at all. But right before we get into it, it is 2022 now, and we're on the road to 100K, and it's going to be a big year, so quickly be sure to subscribe to the channel if you have not already, smash that like button for the algorithm, and turn on post notifications so you never miss when I upload. Now, let's talk about Alabama football. Before we can talk about how Alabama ruined Cincinnati's miracle Cinderella season, let's talk about just how dominant the Tide have been during the playoff era. In fact, they've won 6 national titles in the past 12 years, and if they can beat Georgia like they did in the SEC championship game, then that would make 7. Last year we saw the Tide dominate Ohio State in the final game, and it's left many people tired of Alabama's dominance. Sports Illustrated's college football writer Ross Dellinger had this to say, quote, "Most people would tell you that Alabama's dominance, which is a big part of the lack of parity in college football the last 10 years, is not good for college football. They would tell you they want more parity and a more diverse group of teams in the playoffs." I would say that's the general consensus around college football. I'm personally a fan of both Purdue and Mizzou, and neither of my teams are ever going to sniff the college football playoff, which has made me realize the importance of the regular season, and I enjoy college football for what it is. I don't expect my teams to get to the final game, and honestly, that's not how it should be, but that's reality. I like Alabama football, but I wouldn't be lying if I said I'm tired of seeing them there. People may call me a hater for that, but no one wants to see the same team every single year. No matter how much you like the Tide, the best part about sports is the constant parity, and most other leagues have that, but college football does not. Clemson and Ohio State have both won a title in the last few years, but neither of them can really seemingly compete with Alabama anymore. Clemson is struggling a little bit this year, and Ohio State lost 2 games, and these were 2 programs that were supposed to reload at all the most important positions. That is exactly what Alabama did this year. If we take a look at their roster, they had a new quarterback. Mac Jones is likely going to be the Rookie of the Year in the NFL and is the franchise quarterback of the New England Patriots. He's now gone. Both Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle are headed to the NFL, and both of them are likely going to be wide receiver 1s for their teams for multiple years now. Smith won the Heisman Trophy and is the most promising piece on this Eagles team, and Jalen Waddle has been tremendous as a Rookie of the Year candidate and is likely going to be a star for years to come down in Miami. As of right now, you've lost those 3 guys, which are hard for any program to replace. That's not even adding in Najee Harris. He was also a first-round pick, a Rookie of the Year candidate, and the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers. That right there is 4 future NFL superstars, and Alabama just plugged in new players, and they're seemingly just as good or better than last year's team. Well, yes, the offensive line has not been anything spectacular this year for the Tide. Players at the other skill positions have stepped up. It does help when you bring in the number 1 quarterback in the country, as Bryce Young flipped from USC to Alabama. He played a little bit last year behind Mac Jones, but this year he broke the record for passing yards in a season, passing touchdowns, and total touchdowns, and somehow, even though they lose an NFL star quarterback, they bring in one that could be better. Running back was a major concern for the Tide this year. Not because of talent, but more so experience. You had guys like Roydell Williams, Jace McClellan, Kamar Wheaton, and Brian Robinson, and none of them had really put up eye-popping numbers. This is Robinson's 5th year seeing the field, and he has come out on top and become a true number 1 back and a star. He'll likely be a 2nd or 3rd round pick this year, and once again, he'll probably be great in the NFL. At wide receiver, they have 2 more guys who are likely going to be day 1 or day 2 picks. The first one is Jameson Williams. For die-hard college football fans, many of you guys knew Jameson was a top 100 player coming out of high school and was sort of an afterthought on the Ohio State team, but Nick Saban saw something in him and decided to bring him down to Tuscaloosa. What did he do? Well, he made him into a Biletnikoff finalist, an All-American, and a likely top 15 draft pick. Jameson Williams is a deep threat, the guy who can do a little bit of everything, and has taken over for Alabama this year. The other guy is John Mechie. While he ended up tearing his ACL in the SEC championship game, and we likely won't get to see him in the title game, Mechie is going to probably be a second or third round draft pick. And he's another dude who had a great career, and it just seems they always reload at the most important positions. They didn't lose a tight end from last year, but Cameron Latu and Jaleel Billingsley are both likely NFL tight ends, and many fans outside of Alabama wonder, when will the madness end? There's always a new 5-star class coming in, there's always a freshman showing superstar potential, and there are always veterans who do not make mistakes and find their names called on Sunday. Alabama is the definition of dominance, and I don't think that is going to change anytime soon. So how have the Tide done this season? Well, let's take a look. A total of 10 Alabama players got drafted last year, but that did not stop people from picking them to win the SEC and the Western Division. They started out ranked number 1 in the country, and they would match up with number 14 Miami in the Chick-fil-A kickoff game. This was not close from the very beginning, and the Tide cruised to a 44-13 victory. In week 2, they took care of Mercer, and then they had a difficult game in week 3 at Florida. At the time, the Gators were ranked number 11 in the country, and this was supposed to be one of the games in the conference that year. As we all know, Florida was terrible, but they put up a good fight in this game and ran all over the Alabama defense. Florida would have an opportunity to tie the game late, but they failed on a 2-point conversion, and Bama survived by 2. This was the first scare and showed that Bama was beatable. What did they do? They went home and beat Southern Miss, and then in a crucial SEC Western matchup against number 12 Ole Miss, Bama dominated from the very beginning, and this game wasn't even close, and honestly was the biggest letdown of any game this year in my eyes. College football fans, though, would be in for a treat, as the following weekend had a ton of exciting matchups, and one of the biggest ones was Alabama at Texas A&M. The Aggies were originally a top 10 team going into the year, but they had fallen off and not played well, but they still looked to play spoiler. The Aggies got off to an early lead, but Bama made a comeback before eventually A&M made a comeback and kicked a game-winning field goal, and that was the first time a Nick Saban assistant had beat him. Alabama had now lost their first game of the year and moved down to number 5 in the country. Their next game, they'd be pretty angry as they beat Mississippi State 49-9. Then they started to struggle to end the year. Against Tennessee, they were in a close game well into the second half, but then they put on the Jets and easily beat the Volunteers 52-24. But the score does not tell the story in that one. They're favored by nearly 30 points at home against LSU, but in what was one of the weirder games of the year, the Tigers actually put up a great fight and narrowly lost 20-14. After that, they took care of New Mexico State before they would play number 21 Arkansas at home. Just like 2 of these last 3 matchups, the Razorbacks came to play and ended up losing 42-35. Bama looked beatable, and had they just lost to Auburn, they would be eliminated from the playoff. That's what was happening. The Auburn defense absolutely manhandled this Alabama offensive line, and Auburn did enough to get some points on the board. As we all know, though, Bryce Young had his Heisman moment as he led the team down the field and threw a pass to Ja'Cory Brooks to send the game to overtime. There were a couple of boneheaded coaching decisions by Brian Harsin, and eventually Alabama won in 4 overtimes and advanced to the SEC Championship, where they were 1 win away from going to the college football playoff. At this point, casual fans were unbelievably angry, as Bama had seemingly snuck away in 4 of their last 5 games, but that's what great teams do. Against number 1 Georgia, surely they were going to meet their match, but instead, they played their most complete and best game of the season as they killed the Bulldogs 41-24, and it wasn't even that close. They had now clinched their spot in the college football playoff and were the number 1 team in the land. They would face the Cinderella team of number 4 Cincinnati, and no one really thought the Bearcats would win, but America was cheering for them for the most part. Surprisingly, Cincinnati's defense actually wasn't that bad, and while they did give up 27 points, I thought it was going to be a lot worse than that. What was shocking is how well Alabama's defense played. Despite Desmond Ridder and Jerome Ford being great, they could not get anything going. They were seemingly playing very conservative, and it was a really horrible and abysmal offensive performance for the Bearcats. Because of that, Alabama won 27-6, where they will now advance to the national championship and play against Georgia. Georgia manhandled the Michigan Wolverines last night, and this game was embarrassing. It looks like it'll be a rematch of the SEC title game, and I am praying this will be a close game and one that'll go down in the history books. In terms of what I think is in store for the future of this Tide team, it'd be hard for me not to pick them to win the national championship. It is hard to beat a team twice, but until Kirby Smart can somehow beat Nick Saban, it's wise to never bet against him. I think whenever defense plays better will win, and I know that's a very obvious statement, but both have equal talent, monsters on both the offense and defensive line, and stars at key positions, so it'll likely come down to the battle of the trenches and the quarterback play. In terms of the battle of the trenches, I would give Georgia a slight edge, but in terms of the skill players and the actual quarterback spot, I would give that to Alabama. Then, throw in the coaching advantage that the Tide have, and it's easy to pick them. I really do not know what to expect in this game though, as it could be a blowout or it could be close. What do you guys think? What is your prediction for this game, and who do you think will win? So now we get to the question of how do we fix the college football playoff? Well, the obvious and easy answer is to say expansion, but it's going to take a little bit more than that. At the end of the day, Alabama has the best culture, the best coaching, and the track record to get the best players, so no matter what schedule or what teams they have to go through, they're likely going to win. But you guys don't want that answer, so let's come up with a theory on how all this could change. Well, expansion and NIL could be the two game changers for this. Let's first talk about expansion. There had been the rumors that we'd quickly accelerate to a 12-team bracket, but it looks like that traction has fallen a little bit and definitely cooled off. I'm not sure why, but the playoff committee keeps meeting and they never seem to get anything accomplished or decide upon anything. I think they're waiting to see how this year played out before they would make any decision, and there's no way that ratings are not going to go down and that fan apathy will be at an all-time high. Yesterday's games were unbelievably boring, and even I contemplated turning both of them off by halftime. Unless you're a fan of one of these schools, the postseason is pretty much worthless and not even worth your time watching. Expansion will change that. Well, as I previously said, it likely won't change the winner of the whole thing, it'll at least make the games going into a little bit more exciting. For example, let's say we went to 12 teams this year. The 12 seed would have been Pitt from the ACC, the 11 seed would have been Utah, the 10 seed would have been Michigan State, the 9 seed would have been Oklahoma State, the 8 seed would have been Ole Miss, the 7 seed would be Baylor, and then you obviously have the 6 seed of Ohio State and the 5 seed of Notre Dame. Some of those first round matchups would be insane. This was just a graphic I saw from Reddit College Football, but if they did do a 12-team system, you would likely see plans from all the other small conferences. But just for the heck of this argument, let's use this. Ole Miss and Oklahoma State would have been a tremendous game. Oklahoma State is one of the best defenses in the country, and Ole Miss is one of the best offenses. While both these teams likely would have gotten killed by Alabama in the second round, that game would have been great. We wouldn't have seen guys like Matt Corral opt out, and it would have been so much fun. Notre Dame was a team that only lost one game to Cincinnati, and playing against one of the best quarterback-receiver duos in the country of Jordan Addison and Kenny Pickett would have been another spectacular matchup. Utah was one of the hottest teams in the country by the end of the year, and Ohio State was a team that had playoff talent but just didn't execute in 2 of their games, and that would have been an excellent matchup to watch as well. Finally, you would have had Michigan State and Baylor, and these were the 2 Cinderella teams of this season. Michigan State did not have the defense, and Baylor didn't have the offense. I would have loved to watch all 4 of those matchups, especially if they were located on one of the campuses. I know a lot more people would have been tuned into that than the actual bowl games themselves. As I previously said, so many players have opted out. The best 2 receivers for Ohio State and Olave and Wilson are gone. Kenneth Walker didn't play for Michigan State, and Kyron Williams and Kenny Pickett did not play for those 2 schools. Those bowl games that those teams played in were pretty much already ruined, but had they had an opportunity to play for a national title, we would have seen some of the best players in the games get to play another game. The odds are at least 2 of these games would have been exciting as well, and that's not even adding in the next matchups. For example, you could see Michigan against Baylor, Georgia against Ohio State, Cincinnati against Notre Dame for a rematch, or Alabama against Ole Miss for a rematch. It's very tough to beat a team twice, and some of these games would have been rematches, so that would add an extra level of intrigue. Also, if teams like Ole Miss and Notre Dame had won, they'd likely have momentum, and this may make the games more even. Even if it ended up being Bama, Michigan, Cincinnati, and Georgia once again for the Final Four, we would have at least had 8 opportunities for good games, and that would have been a lot more fun. There would have been less time between games, which is another problem. When you give someone like Nick Saban a month to prepare for his opponent, there is absolutely no way he's going to lose that game. For example, in college basketball, a 1 seed may only have 4 or 5 days to prepare for their opponent, and if they beat that team, they're going to play the winner of the 8-9 game, which means coaches have to be preparing for 3 teams in a 5-day stretch. If they have one bad shooting night, they could easily get upset, or if they aren't preparing the right way, they could lose early. In college football, there is none of that. You get a month to prepare, you know exactly who you're going to be playing after, and there's so many more factors to a football game than a basketball game that will allow for the better team to win. For example, even if Alabama only passed for 20 yards, as long as they had a good defense, did well on special teams, took care of the ball, and ran the ball, they would have still likely had a dominant win. The same cannot be said for the other sports. So yeah, in terms of expansion, I would love to see it go to a 12-team format, and in my eyes, there's absolutely no downside to it. Less players are opting out, there's more opportunities for Cinderella runs, and there's more games. In my eyes, it's a win-win, but there are going to be negative people who think it's a horrible thing for the game. I would also gladly take a week away from the regular season schedule, as Alabama's game against New Mexico State or Ohio State's game against Kent State is not going to matter in the grand scheme of things, and I'd rather just delete those and replace that with a college football playoff weekend. But what do I know? We're likely not going to see 12 Power 5 schools make it though, as each conference would get a buy-in, and that likely doesn't help the argument of expansion, but at least gives everyone a chance, and I think that's what people want. The second part of this is NIL. I really haven't made a video on this channel about my stance on it, but I'm in big support of it. Coaches have made millions upon millions of dollars off these players for years, and I think it's only right that they can benefit off their own name. I mean, for goodness sakes, why can't Johnny Manziel sell his own jersey to a crowd with 110,000 people? It didn't make any sense. I'm not all about paying the players, but allowing them to make their own opportunities off their name is something I'm in strong support of. I also think it's going to end up balancing college football. I may end up eating crow on this in a few years, but I do believe this. For example, if you go to Alabama, you're going to play against the best competition, you're going to have the best coaching, and you're going to win SEC titles and national championships. Right now, there may be one of 4 schools that has a legit chance to go every year to the playoff, and now all of a sudden, if you're a 5-star recruit, maybe you don't go to Alabama. Maybe you go somewhere else. When I talk to friends, I use the example of a team like a Penn State. They're probably the 2nd or 3rd best team in the Big Ten on any given year. They attract a lot of talent, and they're a huge brand name. Now all of a sudden, if there's 12 teams, a 10-2 Penn State or an 11-1 Penn State can now get to the playoff without having to beat Ohio State every year. If you're a 5-star, why not take that opportunity? You can get paid a bunch of money in NIL to play for that program, be the face of that program, and have the opportunity to compete for a championship. You may no longer have to wait 3 years to get on the field at a school like Bama or Clemson, and you can get both your opportunity and your playing time. I also think it expands recruiting to a lot of different schools. A team like Wisconsin is in the hunt every single year for the Big Ten championship, but they can never seemingly get over the hump. The same goes for schools like Oregon, Florida, and even Michigan for that matter. There are all those programs that are close, but they can never sneak into the top 4. I think all of a sudden, big-time recruits can still go play for a big-time program, play at the highest stage, and I do believe recruits will spread out a little bit more because of this. There is one major downside to NIL though. It's basically pay for players. What's stopping someone like Phil Knight at Oregon from just donating millions upon millions of dollars to buy players to go to Oregon? The same could be said for Alabama or any of these other schools. At this point, a school like Alabama can offer the biggest platform in the country, has a fan base that stretches all across the world, and they could easily bring in the money to get anyone they want to go there. It's a double-edged sword, but at the end of the day, I think NIL will balance out college football a little bit more, make things more interesting, and hopefully make the playoff a little bit better. This video will be a little bit controversial as people have their own opinions on the playoff bracket and NIL, but one thing I think we can all agree on is that the playoff sucks, postseason is really boring, and yesterday's games epitomized everything that has gone wrong in the last few years. Alabama has been the dynasty, the brand, and the team, and Nick Saban has been the coach, and that is not stopping anytime soon, whether there are 60 teams in the bracket or whether there's 4. Props to Saban and his staff for continually being prepared, replacing their best players, and building a culture of excellence and domination. I'm curious to see how they play against Georgia next Monday, and hopefully it's an exciting game. What do you guys think though? What do you think of the Alabama dynasty? How can the college football playoff be saved? And what are your opinions on both the bracket and NIL? Be sure to let me know down in the comment section, smash that like button if you want to support today's video, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.